I mean, he was a TV star. He was an American TV star, and I don't think there has been a bigger star. But he didn't do it by acting. He did it by just being himself.
For years and years and years, I've been Johnny Carson's idol. Now, you've said it, haven't you?
Many times.
Many times. Then all of a sudden, the whole thing switched, and Johnny Carson became my idol.
Late-night TV from the 60s to the 80s was a different world, and Johnny Carson ruled it like no one else, hosting thousands of guests over decades. But which stars actually lit up his stage, made him laugh, and kept him inviting them back again and again? He never released a list, but from interviews, clips, and fan stories, we can piece together the golden age guests who truly clicked with him. Some brought chaos, others pure wit, and a few changed the game entirely with their energy. In this video, we're breaking it down guest by guest, sharing the wildest moments, unexpected stories, and exactly why Carson couldn't get enough of them. Stick around because a few of these picks might surprise you. Number 10. Don Rickles.
Are you the governor of Guam?
Aren't you getting a little older?
I know your age. The prom's over.
All right.
If you've ever watched Don Rickles on The Tonight Show, you know exactly why Johnny Carson kept inviting him back. He was basically like that uncle who shows up at every family barbecue with the most outrageous jokes, making everyone squirm and laugh at the same time. Johnny Carson loved him for that exact reason. He had this way of tossing insults at literally everyone on set, from Johnny to Ed McMahon, the band, even the audience, and somehow it never felt mean-spirited. Rickles had this razor-sharp timing and wit that could make anything funny, no matter how trivial, and it's easy to see why Carson booked him over 50 times.
I think it's time you moved on.
I think so.
I'm not saying that facetiously.
I'm not retiring. I'm just stepping down as the host of this show.
You're finished.
There are other things I want to get about.
Stop trying to be graceful. They asked you to get out and you're walking.
One of the most legendary moments was back in 1976 during a Frank Sinatra interview. Rickles just barged in like he owned the place, totally unscripted, and joked about interrupting a bad date while begging Sinatra not to have him killed. The crowd completely lost it, and Johnny was laughing so hard he could barely keep his composure. Another classic is from 1975, when he called Johnny a rhinestone cowboy during a bit about his golf game. The whole set turned into chaos in the best way possible. And it wasn't just Johnny. Rickles loved picking on Ed McMahon, too. There's that unforgettable 1976 moment when he roasted Ed about his engagement, and Ed's face turned so red you could practically see the embarrassment from the cheap seats. Even in later years, Rickles didn't slow down. The 1983 episode had him riffing endlessly on Johnny's suits and hosting quirks, and Carson was eating it up. By 1990, during one of his final appearances, he was still going after the crew, Bob Newhart, and anyone else nearby, keeping the energy wild. What made him so special to Johnny wasn't just that he was funny. It was that he brought this electric, fearless vibe that no one else could. You never knew exactly what he'd say next, and that unpredictability made the show feel alive every time. If you thought Rickles was done surprising people, think again. He was always just one wild line away from chaos. Number 9. Joan Rivers. When people look back at the golden years of The Tonight Show, Joan Rivers always comes up because she wasn't just another comedian who stopped by a few times. She basically became part of the show's rhythm. She appeared over 100 times, which is wild when you think about it, and Johnny Carson trusted her enough to make her the permanent guest host in 1983. That was huge, especially because late-night comedy at that point was almost entirely dominated by men, and Joan's presence broke through that barrier in a big way.
Johnny, you've met her. Christy Brinkley's a living testament.
She's what?
You never can look at me and do these, can you? Tell me about her a little bit.
She's a living testament.
Living testament to that what? Chrissy Brinkley's a living testament that.
Peroxide causes brain damage.
Their chats felt like a family reunion, full of playful jabs and warm laughs. In 1979, Joan had Johnny cracking up with stories about her dating disasters, poking fun at herself in a way that made everyone feel in on the joke. Another time that year, she riffed on what she wanted in a guy, and Johnny was practically wheezing from her bold humor. She'd roast other guests too, like in 1982, going toe-to-toe with Betty White in a hilarious verbal sparring match, with Carson playing referee and loving the chaos. However, things got messy in 1986, when Joan started her own show without telling him, and Johnny felt betrayed, cutting her off completely. But before that drama, their chemistry was pure gold. She matched his sharp energy with her edgy, fearless style. Her 1981 appearance, venting about the dating scene, was like a podcast before podcasts were a thing, raw and real. But if you think Joan Rivers was the most liked before their messy fallout, there's one man who topped them all, showing up an incredible 131 times. Johnny invited him back more than anyone else, and his presence was basically a Tonight Show institution. Curious who it is? Stick around, because before the end of this video, you'll discover who the guest Johnny Carson had more than any other, and the reason he kept coming back for decades. Number 8. Dean Martin.
Yeah, sure.
You're gonna start already, huh?
No, I'm not starting.
How are you?
I'm almost through.
Good to see you.
How'd all these people get in your room?
If Joan Rivers was all about high-energy banter and sharp comebacks, Dean Martin was the total flip side. Dean had this way of walking into the studio and instantly slowing the pace down without ever making it boring. He was part of that old-school Rat Pack charm, and whenever he showed up on The Tonight Show, which he did around 30 times, it felt less like an interview and more like Johnny was hanging out with an old buddy in a lounge somewhere. Dean leaned into that easygoing persona. Sometimes he acted like he was already a few drinks in, and honestly, a lot of people still debate whether that was real or just part of his comedy. Either way, it worked. One of the most talked about appearances was in 1978, when Johnny actually reached over and took a sip from Dean's drink. The audience went nuts because it looked so natural, like something two friends would do at a private party. That was their chemistry, casual, funny, and comfortable. He also loved popping up unannounced. In 1972, he walked out during Buddy Hackett's segment to surprise Johnny for the show's anniversary. Another time in 1969, he crashed the stage unexpectedly, and Johnny's face lit up in that genuine way he had when something truly surprised him. That kind of spontaneity made Dean's visits feel different from the usual scripted setup. Dean wasn't just there for the jokes either. He sometimes sang on the show, bringing that signature crooner style, and Johnny clearly enjoyed those performances. And even when he wasn't the official guest, like in a 1973 episode hosted by Joey Bishop, where Frank Sinatra was also present, Dean's charisma just drew attention. Whether he was joking about cue cards, cracking up the audience, or simply strolling in with a drink in his hand, Dean Martin proved that you didn't need to be over the top to own the room. His effortless cool stood out on a stage often filled with high-energy comedy. Number 7. Joan Embery. Now, when most guests walked out on The Tonight Show, they were usually holding a microphone, a stack of cue cards, or maybe just a big smile. But Joan Embery was different because she'd come strolling out with something that had scales, wings, or maybe even tusks. She was the official spokesperson for the San Diego Zoo starting in the early 1970s, and she ended up being one of Johnny's most frequent visitors, showing up more than 50 times. What made her appearances stand out wasn't just the novelty of seeing an animal on late-night TV, but the way things rarely went exactly as planned. Take her 1974 visit when she brought out a cheetah that was clearly uncomfortable under the studio lights.
Oh, 2 pounds, and we're just babies. We had 3. These are 2 males, and unfortunately our female was stolen from our wild animal park.
Really? Now, why on earth would somebody...
They're bluffing.
You could see Johnny leaning back, half curious and half scared, cracking those little nervous smiles that always got the audience laughing. And then, in 1986, she walked in with a baby mountain lion, and of course, the little guy ignored all of Joan's careful handling and went straight after a remote-controlled toy on stage. It was moments like that where you could see Johnny trying to balance chaos and comedy, and viewers loved it. Her list of memorable Tonight Show appearances is a long one. She introduced Johnny to a baby gorilla in 1987, which charmed everyone in the room, and she also brought in a full-grown elephant named Carol that same year. The elephant was so curious and playful that it nearly stole the entire show. Even the smaller animals could cause trouble. In 1986, she tried to demonstrate ferret agility, and of course, the ferrets went completely off script, running in every direction except the one Joan wanted. But here's the thing, Joan never treated these animals like simple props for comedy. Every visit, she made sure to talk about endangered species, conservation, and why protecting habitats mattered.
Look at that.
They have extremely sharp claws, and they look very cuddly, but I do want to say that when they get nervous or upset or they want to go for a tree, and we'll put him in a tree in a minute and show you, these very sharp claws are used to grasp that limb, and they can be dangerous if they are not used.
She was educating millions of people at a time when most late-night guests were just there to promote a movie or a new record. Johnny respected that balance. He played along with the comedy, but always gave her the room to make her point. And because of that, Joan became a favorite not just of Johnny, but of the audience at home. Number 6. George Carlin. Comedy on The Tonight Show took many forms, but George Carlin gave viewers something completely different, a chance to laugh while also questioning the world around them. His history with Johnny stretched all the way back to the early 1960s, long before he became the counterculture figure people remember today. At first, he looked sharp in a suit, doing lighter jokes about everyday life. But as the years passed, his comedy grew sharper, bolder, and far more provocative, and audiences got to witness that entire transformation right on Carson's stage. He was on The Tonight Show more than 100 times, which is a number that puts him right up there with the most frequent guests ever. One of his most talked about appearances came in 1972, when he broke down the trouble surrounding his now famous routine about words you couldn't say on television.
Uses, more or less, I shouldn't say everybody, then I'll probably get letters saying, we never use that language. We're endorsing it.
I told the policeman that night.
Rather than brushing past it, Johnny let him sit there and really explain it, mixing humor with real insight into censorship and free speech. A few years later, in 1977, Carlin was at his absolute peak. He did a full set of stand-up before sitting down for a longer chat with Johnny, where they got into the more thoughtful side of comedy and society. What people loved about Carlin on The Tonight Show was that he could take huge, complicated topics, politics, consumer culture, or just the ridiculous patterns of everyday life, and boil them down into sharp, funny observations that still made you think. In 1979, for example, he did a bit about being at the top of your game, which had Johnny laughing because it was both brutally honest about fame and hilariously exaggerated in only the way Carlin could deliver. His final Tonight Show appearance in 1992 was especially meaningful because it wasn't just about the jokes anymore. He sat with Johnny, reflecting on how the world, comedy, and even his own career had changed since his very first appearance almost 30 years earlier. It felt less like a performance and more like two old friends having a conversation in front of millions of people. And for fans, that moment tied together everything they had seen him do over 3 decades of visits. And speaking of unpredictable, Carlin's comedy had a way of keeping Johnny on his toes. But if there was one guest who took unpredictability to another level, with physical comedy, offbeat props, and complete chaos, it had to be Steve Martin. Number 5. Steve Martin.
What's been going on in your life?
I don't know, Johnny. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely
Nothing's been happening at all.
If you want to talk about pure chaos mixed with creativity, Steve Martin was the guy who brought it every time he sat in Johnny's guest chair or performed on that stage. He appeared around 40 times on The Tonight Show, and Johnny himself admitted later that Steve was one of his absolute favorites to have on. What made Steve stand out was how unpredictable he was. You never really knew if he was going to juggle something, play the banjo, do magic tricks, or just walk out with a bit so strange that it didn't make sense until halfway through, and that kept Johnny and the audience on their toes. Back in 1973, Steve pulled off one of his early classics when he made an entire bit out of reading a phone book. Somehow, through sheer absurdity and timing, he managed to get laughs out of something as boring as listing names and numbers. In 1980, he teamed up with Carl Reiner in a segment where he acted as if fame hadn't changed him, only for Reiner to hilariously call him out on it, the kind of layered comedy that showed off Martin's genius. A year or two later, in 1982, he delivered one of the most bizarre but unforgettable interviews on the show, blurring the line between whether he was being serious or just inventing a character on the spot. Fans also remember the time in 1988 when he performed The Great Flydini, a magic routine where he pulled objects out of his pants in ways that seemed impossible, leaving Johnny doubled over with laughter. And in 1989, he read a series of fake diary entries with lines like, "Today I invented the wheel," which was exactly the kind of silly, off-the-wall humor that defined his style. Even small bits became legendary. One time, he interrupted the show to check his messages as if it were no big deal, leaving Johnny trying to play along without breaking completely. And in another moment from the late 1970s, he casually ordered dinner on air, as though it were just another normal thing you could do on live television. What kept Johnny inviting Steve back wasn't just the silliness, though. It was the way his energy could turn the entire set into controlled chaos, leaving everyone, from the band to the audience to Johnny himself, wondering what would happen next. That unpredictability was golden for television. Number 4. Robin Williams.
Don't you say that in any way.
No, not me. No. That's right. Got him.
No. Seriously, no. How are you? You know, people get howdy-doody jaw. How are you? Okay.
Robin Williams wasn't the most frequent Tonight Show guest, appearing about 20 times. But every time he came out, it felt like the energy in the room went from normal late-night TV to complete mayhem in the best way possible. His first appearance in 1981 is often pointed to as the moment he really exploded into mainstream stardom. He just couldn't sit still. One second he'd be talking about his family, the next he was doing 3 characters at once, and Johnny mostly sat back in awe, laughing along with the rest of the audience. By 1986, Williams had really refined his rapid-fire style, and his riffs during that visit are still remembered as some of the funniest, with Johnny constantly throwing up his hands as if to say, "There's no stopping this guy." One of the all-time great Tonight Show pairings came in 1991, when Robin appeared alongside his idol, Jonathan Winters. The two bounced off each other with callbacks to Mork and Mindy and layers of improvised bits that no one could have scripted. His Shakespeare-inspired improv in 1987 was another standout, because only Robin could turn a highbrow reference into something hysterical and accessible to a late-night audience. His last spot came in 1992 for Johnny's farewell show, and it was bittersweet. He was still wild and hilarious, but you could tell both men knew it was the end of an era. Number 2. Jonathan Winters.
There's a little friction, between the three, but what the heck, they're all making a lot of bread.
Jonathan Winters showed up on The Tonight Show about 60 times, and honestly, every appearance felt like a little comedy experiment where even Johnny didn't know where things were going to go. He was known for ad-libbing entire routines out of nowhere, and Johnny loved that unpredictability. Sometimes Carson would even join in on sketches just to keep up with him, and those episodes became fan favorites because you could see Johnny crack up like a regular viewer at home. In 1973, Winters did a bit about his time in the Marines, telling stories that were equal parts self-deprecating and exaggerated to the point of absurdity, and the audience ate it up. 3 years later, he spun tales about drinking culture he'd seen in his family, finding ways to make even awkward childhood memories into laughs. One of his most famously odd moments was an anecdote about gluing a cat to the floor. It was totally offbeat, but it showed how his humor thrived on the unexpected. He could stretch any premise into a full routine, like the 1964 baseball skit that's still replayed in highlight reels, or the night in 1988 when he carried an entire show with nothing but improvised bits. Even his sillier stories, like being electrocuted by a toy train, had Johnny shaking his head in disbelief. And when he paired up with Robin Williams, it was like 2 generations of the same comedic spirit colliding. Pure chaos, but unforgettable. Number 1. Bob Hope.
Finally, after signing a few autographs, the waitress, I was just about to leave, she said, "You have to say hello to the cook." And I said, "I only play the big room." She said, "No." "But you have to, because he owns the place. That's Dave." So on the way out, I opened the door. I said, "Hey, goodbye, y'all." And he rushed up to me with an apron on and a T-shirt, with a menu on it, the whole thing. And he said, "Hey, when you get back to Johnny Carson's show, you tell him it's so windy here in Hays, Kansas, that we have whitecaps in the toilet."
Bob Hope was the ultimate legend, and his place on The Tonight Show speaks for itself. He was actually the most frequent guest Johnny Carson ever had, appearing 131 times, which is wild when you think about it. And it really shows just how much Carson and the audience valued him. Hope wasn't just another guest. He was the kind of presence that could carry an entire segment or even a full show with effortless timing and a constant stream of jokes, and Johnny admired him for that. What made him stand out wasn't just the punchlines, though. It was how he could read the room, pivot from one joke to the next, and make it all feel completely natural, like laughter was just part of the air in the studio. Their on-air chemistry was something special. It wasn't forced. It was playful, almost like 2 old friends riffing off each other. One classic moment shows this perfectly. They had a back and forth about aging, with Hope delivering self-deprecating jabs while Johnny couldn't stop laughing, leaning back, wiping tears from his eyes, completely losing his composure. Fans got a glimpse of how much Johnny genuinely enjoyed Hope's humor, not just professionally, but personally. Behind the scenes, Johnny respected Hope even more, seeing him as a mentor who showed him how to connect with audiences, stay relevant through changing times, and master the craft of timing and delivery. Their relationship wasn't just host and guest. It was a meeting of 2 comedic minds, one passing lessons to the other while sharing countless laughs along the way. Which of these guests surprised you the most, or maybe brought back memories of watching classic clips? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear which moments stood out to you. If you enjoyed reliving these legendary Tonight Show moments, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the most iconic figures in TV history.